As they trotted across the grass lit up with light from their hooves. There were three of the most magnificent horses. The thing I do want to talk about, because this is a comfort to so many parents, there was one building that stood out among all the rest. And I asked what building that was, and I was stunned when they said, that is the nursery. And then this magnificent figure turned toward me. Gradually, the shimmer that had covered his features vanished. I found myself face to face with none other.
Jim Woodford was a successful businessman and pilot whose life was focused on the pursuit of wealth. And he ended up getting the Guillain-Barré syndrome, and he died from an overdose of an experimental therapeutic drug that he was taking for the pain, having secretly exceeded the prescribed dosage. On April 21st, 2014, while sitting in his truck, he experienced intense heat. His lungs began to seize. He collapsed, hitting his head violently on the steering wheel. He was in a state of death with complete renal failure of all organs and no sign of brain activity for 11 hours. You've got to watch this testimony with me. He covers seeing horses in heaven, seeing babies, and then encountering Christ and being sent back. As someone myself who 4 years ago was in a traumatic brain accident where I actually left the earth for 18 days in a coma where the hospital actually asked for my last will, I'll be sharing some details with you here later on this video concerning what is on the other realm.
The guardians were wonderful. I felt safe. And then they're very elegant. I do have to tell you this, because I think people would be very interested in this. I was taken by how they bowed to me. They bowed to me. And I felt rather uncomfortable because I should be bowing to them. And I questioned why, because it was such a bow of respect and subservience, and bowed very low. And they spoke with kind of this Victorian perfection in their voice. I didn't hear any thou or thee, but a very measured tone that incredibly, and with every word they spoke, there was wisdom. Anyway, I questioned the guardian that I eventually found out was mine all my life. Now, that angel had pulled an awful tour of duty, but I digress. But I asked why. And they said, James, do you not know that when we look at mankind, we see the spark of life of our master? Isn't that something? We who consider ourselves the lowest of the low are looked at by the angels in awe of us. Anyway, so we walk, and I'll skip forward, but they showed me many things, told me many things. I developed 360-degree omnivision, I call it. I heard everything. I understood everything. The beautiful flowers that spoke to me, that sang to me. But eventually we come to this beautiful pasture, and I guess they knew my love of horses. And again, I think it ties into your comment on your grandmother's chocolate chip cookies and my love of tapioca, because they wanted to show me something that would really make me happy. And the second guardian raised his hand, and suddenly coming from around the grove of trees toward me, and as they trotted across the grass lit up with light from their hooves. And there were three of the most magnificent horses coming toward me. Now, I had never studied the Bible. I had no idea at that time that when Jesus comes back, he'll be riding a white horse. It's in the Bible. And I'm stunned, because as I stand there, and they come right up to the fence, and I had loved their kind all my life, and they seemed to know that. And they looked at me with such love in their eyes. And I reached forward to stroke the neck of the lead horse, and my hands sank right into the body of this being of light. And when I pulled it back, Randy, the light of the horse's body stuck to my hand till I got it 10 to 12 inches beyond, and then it came back into the horse's body. And it was just phenomenal to watch and to experience. And I've come to call it the sticky love of God. That's something you hear every day. That was the horses. And so we went from there, and I'll skip through to a really important part. They were showing me more things, and I suddenly was conscious of one of the guardians standing next to me, and he said, "Hold my cloak." And so I reached over and held on, and suddenly we were above, looking down, I thought I was looking at a reflecting pool, but it opened up, and I realized I'm having an aerial tour of heaven. And I hate using that term because you hear people that talk about our experiences, Randy, and they call it heavenly tourism. What a lack of faith that is, to hear that term of derision. I believe with all my heart. I know this is real. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't hallucinating. And so I was able to look. And I didn't know at that time that I wasn't being allowed to stay. You have to remember that. And people say to me, "Did you see your family?" No, I did not. It was explained to me that later that I could not set foot in the heavenly city, but they would show me the heavenly city. I didn't connect it with the fact that I wasn't staying. So anyway, to see the halls of knowledge, the halls of wisdom, how heaven is laid out. And yes, the streets are gold, but it's not the brassy gold that we come to think of on earth. It's a different shimmer of gold. It's not the Fort Knox kind of gold. So saw many things, had the opportunity to ask many questions. The thing I do want to talk about, because this is a comfort to so many parents, there was one building that stood out among all the rest. And the buildings are made not of stone, not of wood, but of a material that has a light in it. Now, that I don't want it to sound too Las Vegas-y, but it was a gentle, welcoming light. But this particular building glowed with a light that had a warmth to it. And I asked what building that was, and I was stunned when they said, "That is the nursery." And I responded, "Nursery in heaven?" And they said, "Yes, James, this is where the souls of aborted children, or children who die in their innocence from disease, or come back here. And each soul is so precious to God that they're cared for. They grow at a different rate because they're not growing a physical body. So they grow at about 3 times the rate that we do, that a child does on earth. And this is where they take care and so on of the little souls that have been unwanted or have died." And I had no idea how this part of the story would have such an effect on women who have lost children. And it's been a blessing to explain to these parents that their child lives. Their child lives. And so, anyway, getting right to the main event. After showing me much more, we came back to paradise, the ground of paradise, which was outside the walls, I learned. And I was looking once again at the horses, and I realized I hadn't seen my guardian for a while. So I turned to look for him, and I saw him, and he was about no more than maybe 40, 50 feet away on a small rise. And but when I looked, he was bent over, almost in a kneeling position, and was holding up a book. And facing him was a more magnificent figure than even the angels, but I couldn't see the face, and it was in profile to me. Do you know how you drive down a hot road on a warm summer day and there's a shimmer on the pavement? There was this kind of shimmer covering the features of this magnificent being but clearly he was reading what the guardian was holding up. And I took note of the book that the guardian had taken out of his sleeve. And it was as thin as a cheap roadside diner menu. And suddenly the awareness came over me that what the guardian was holding was the book of my life. And instead of it being a book filled with good deeds and kindness, all I had to show for a life that I thought was the epitome of success was this tiny, tiny book. Thin. You know, Charles Dickens wrote a wonderful line when he wrote, "Mankind should have been my business." And instead, it was all about the pursuit of wealth. And all I had to show for it, although I thought myself a kind person, all I had to show for it was this little thin book. I am determined, fellas, that to live my life now, that when I go back, if they permit me to go back, when they open the book of my life for this chapter, they're going to need 3 angels and a forklift to get it open. You know? So anyway, I'm watching, and this figure is leaning forward, clearly intent on the little bit that's written in there, and suddenly the figure straightened up, and the angel folded the book, put it in his sleeve, and disappeared. And then this magnificent figure turned toward me. And as he turned from profile to direct on, suddenly the shimmer, gradually the shimmer that had covered his features vanished. And I found myself face to face with none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God, someone that I thought was just some old Jewish legend that people had made up to create whatever. And I'm looking at this figure and the magnificence of this figure, not just the look of intense love and concern for me, but this golden light flowed out of him from all, seemed to start at his head and flow down his body. And it was light that behaved like slow moving water. It flowed off him and it flowed down that slope. And I fell to my knees and tried to crawl toward him. I had to get closer. And it was as though I had finally come home, that I had found what I had searched for all my life. And I started to crawl toward him and to get closer. And then his eyes looked into mine. And when I looked into those eyes of gray and green and blue, I was lost in the love of eternity. This magnificent creature knew me too, but this was a creature of love and forgiveness and desired to know me better. And for a split second, and Randy, you probably experienced this too, although my intellect knew better, it was as though when my eyes met his, it was as though I was the only one in creation, the only one he had ever created. He knew me that intimately and loved me that deeply. And it was a moment that I knew from then on that whatever happened to me, I was his forever. Forever. But I just wanted to be around him. And I tried to crawl closer to him, and 2 guardians appeared beside me and held me back. And I struggled free and continued to climb toward him. And suddenly he raised his right hand. And there was no mistaking what the gesture meant. He was still smiling in a gentle way, but this was a definite command to stop. And I remember the feeling inside of me of not being allowed to come closer. And I waited I don't know, bated breath, I guess, if I was breathing. But I was just completely enveloped in the love of his eyes. And then I guess I must have taken another step or two or crawled on my knees, and I heard all of a sudden he raised his hand even higher. And Randy, when he raised his hand, his cloak fell back, and I saw the remains of the crucifixion. And then he looked intently at me, and he began to speak to me. And people say to me, what did it sound like? How can I possibly, I attempt to, but how can I possibly be accurate? But suddenly I heard his voice, and with him, unlike the angels, which was more of a telepathy, not telepathy, but a mind thing, Jesus's face moved just as you or I would, speaking to each other. And then I heard the voice of the Son of God, and it stunned me that he knew my name. He knew me. And he looked at me with the gentlest of smiles, hand still raised, meaning to not come forward. And he said to me, James, my son, this is not yet your time. Go back and tell your brothers and sisters of the wonders we have shown you. And his hand slowly came down and crossed over his left. And I was overwhelmed with the fact that he knew my name. But more than that, I was now coming to the realization that I wasn't being allowed to stay. And I began to plead. I began to beg. Please let me stay. This is what I've yearned for all my existence. I just want to be wherever you are. Please don't send me away. Please let me stay. And I remember saying this, please let me stay. I won't be any trouble. Can you imagine saying that to the Son of God? I won't be any trouble. But I was desperate. And suddenly 2 guardians appeared beside me and lifted me from the ground and turned me around and were carrying me back down the path. And I wrenched my shoulder away to turn to beg one more time to allow me to stay. And Jesus was gone. But standing exactly in the place where he had stood was this magnificent warrior angel that had greeted me. And all of a sudden, he began to expand. He grew even taller than 15 feet, and he put his wings out to their full magnificence. And they spread out and upward in this beautiful gold, and he was surrounded with light. And the message was clear that he was barring the way forward for me. And suddenly, I feel the angels hold me again. Everything goes dark, and I'm in a black tunnel, and I can hear water, and it's cold, and it's painful, and I feel like I'm descending at tremendous speed. But unlike the tunnel of light, there's no beauty. There's just darkness, and I'm going down this steep descent, and suddenly, I guess they tell me that I scared the daylights out of the nurses, because I'd been, of course, triaged, and they had told my wife that there was no hope of me coming back, that there was no brain sign, no sign of dreaming, no sign of hallucinating, nothing. And brain sign, of course, is the measure of death, not heartbeat. They, of course, had triaged me, had me hooked up to everything. There was complete renal failure of all my organs. And the doctors had said to Lorraine that they would keep me until our children arrived to say goodbye, and then they would recommend that she pull the plug on the machinery that was flowing blood through my organs. And suddenly I come upright and scared the daylights out of the nurse, she told me, and later, and screaming around all the tubes because I was intubated. And they ran and got my wife and said, Mrs. Woodford, come quickly, come quickly. And Lorraine's a nurse. She ran into the room and she couldn't believe it. She said, my eyes were as big as saucers. I was trying to orient from the beauty of heaven to lying on a gurney. And she climbed up on the bed with me and started to cry, and they were watching my blood pressure come back to normal, all my organs start to operate again. So eventually they pulled the tube out so I could speak clearly, and my throat was terribly sore and raw. And I looked into my wife's pretty face, and I said, Lorraine, I saw Jesus, and Jesus has horses. Of all the things I could have said to her, Jesus has horses. And I'm back.
After waking up, Jim Woodford went on to fully and miraculously recover from what was completely impossible. And as someone myself who 4 years ago, I was in a traumatic brain accident where my skull was cracked in half. My lungs had failed. I actually was resuscitated. I lost life, and I was in a coma for 18 days. And I was in a place where I passed through the other veil. And I can attest to you that this testimony that he just shared isn't just something that I can relate with, but it is biblical. You can tell it's not just someone's imaginations, but here's what you need to understand. And there's a lot we need to talk about. I firstly want to address the animals topic of heaven. Of course, there aren't just horses. Of course, there are dogs and cats. And God doesn't give you desires. He doesn't give good gifts to the earth, yet withholds them from heaven. He's not double-minded. And so how beautiful it is that, of course, there are horses in heaven. How powerful and how anointed it is that there's a nursery in heaven for all the lives that have been lost here on this earth. Humans are not just clumps of cells in the womb. Notice, God didn't say that all those babies in the nursery were simply inconveniences. They simply were up to the woman to choose. No, God valued those babies just as much as any other human being. And thank God they are still alive in heaven. And thank God we didn't lose them. However, man, I don't know about you, but if that testimony meant anything to you, it will drive you down here on this earth to help save lives. It will drive you to value life from the start. When I was before Jesus as well, I truly did feel like I was the only person that he had ever known. I really felt that he was solely focused just on me, that he had given up everything just for me. That if I was the only one to ever exist in the future, he would be more than satisfied. Like seriously, he was obsessed with, in love with me. And it ruined every expectation I had. And of course, actually, he sent me back to my body as well because of you. You that are watching this video, every single person, he sent me back to this earth to tell the truth of who he really is. You are his most beloved. You're worth everything to him. I loved how he mentioned Jesus communicated to him beyond just words. It was spirit to spirit because God is spirit. And he made us in his image and in his likeness. This is why we pray in the Holy Ghost. What language do you think Adam spoke in? He obviously didn't have English or Hebrew. He spoke spirit to spirit. That's why we pray in tongues, personally, one-on-one, with God. For the 18 days that I was in heaven, everything changed. Yet it went by as if it was just 2 minutes, if that. Seriously, it was just a moment. Yet I was gone from the earth for 18 days. They even asked for my last will. And I would love to share more details of my testimony with you because God has released me to. And I've actually held back from writing a book because I didn't want to have anything to do with sharing my testimony. It was so precious to me. But he specifically told me to release the details. My book, 18 Days in Heaven, is actually coming out April 2026. So hopefully by the time you see this video, the pre-order link will be down in the description below. If it's not, please forgive me. It just hasn't been released yet, but stay on the lookout. And if you do want to see more details of my testimony, click the video right above my finger.